Well, hey, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are continuing in our series talking about the four temperaments as we are breaking down the book and content from author and counselor Kathleen Edelman. She wrote a book called I Said This and You Heard That, talking about the different temperaments and how our unique wiring colors our communication. And so she's done an incredible job at associating colors with temperaments and allowing us a visual to understand better who we are as individuals, and not only how we speak to others, but then even how others speak to us and how we can frame all of that. And just like the past 2 weeks, I really want to encourage you to take a deep dive into this content, to check out the related content in the links provided in this podcast and through these posts. Check out her YouTube channel. I Said This, You Heard That. There's a lot of different components to that, videos that are available, other books, even a book specifically about parenting, which is incredible. And you can actually ask or you can have a ColorWorks group presenter come to your business, organization, church, whatever it may be, and present about these temperaments to your group and try to improve the communication within whatever area of career and occupation that you're part of. But hopefully by today you have reviewed the strengths and the weaknesses of the temperaments. You've taken the assessment. You know which temperament that you are, and I hope that you are starting to gain a little confidence in your wiring as well, that you can begin to practice the script, Kathleen's script, to pause and choose a different approach or a different response. We gave you the homework to say, I have a tendency to respond this way or to be this way, but I'm going to choose to be some other way. And I was just having a conversation before we started this podcast, and it's kind of the idea of looking at life now from a third-party point of view, from 30,000 feet. And if you've ever rewritten a text message or an email, then you totally understand this. You know that your initial tendency was to write or respond, really to react out of emotion or even out of our weaknesses, but instead we choose to pause and we respond to the situation, as we're going to see later, not to the what is happening, but to the why of the what that is taking place. And today, that's what we're talking about. And so I think, hopefully we are ready for this next component. Today, what we're talking about are the innate needs of each one of the temperaments. The innate needs are the natural needs that need to be satisfied, and they're not ever fully satisfied, but the satisfaction of needing to be met throughout our days. And it's something we have to continue to do. Now, before we jump into it, just as a reminder, as we talk about words, as we talk about conversation, we know that words carry weight, right? I know that for myself, my words impact my children differently than my wife's words do. I know that in my responsibility as a pastor of a church, that my words have a tendency to weigh a little more than other people in some people's lives, that what I say can carry weight or value. And I have to be very careful with those words that I choose. And so what we identify is that words and the weight of words is not equal for everybody. And while some people may brush off certain words, for other people, those same words have a tendency to tear them down or to beat them down. And that can be very detrimental to people's lives. And so, for a word that I may speak to my son might motivate him to achieve something greater, but on the flip side, it may be a word that is overwhelming to my daughter, who's a different temperament. And sometimes, we forget a lot of those words, and some temperaments have a tendency to kind of brush those words off more than others. Some remember everything that's ever been said to them, and it makes communication very challenging. And so what my hope is today is that our topic of the innate needs of the temperaments can help to make sense of all of this, why people respond the way they do, and how words land with people differently. Now, the Apostle Paul, he underscores this, and he wants us to get this right, specifically in being able to meet the needs or for their needs, as the scripture says, Ephesians 4:29. which is our key verse through this whole series. He says that we should be more focused on the needs of others than our own needs. And so we have to identify the needs of others, and so that we can respond differently to actually meet their needs. It helps to know what they are and ensure that we build them up every time. He says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, and that it may benefit those who listen. And so when we're talking about innate needs, what we're essentially referring to is like a tank. Think of it like a gas tank on a vehicle. It's filled up with the words that are said to us and the words that we say to other people. And when this tank is full, we're operating out of our strengths. We're operating in a positive manner. We're providing to conversations and to people's lives. But when our tank, our innate needs tank, becomes empty, then it means that we're beginning to operate out of our weaknesses. And so it can be very unnerving. It can be very negative, and it can begin to take away from people's lives instead of adding to them. Now, some of the examples of this, and I'll use the strengths we talked about last time. When you have a yellow, which is a sanguine, they're optimistic and encouraging, right? The reds are cholerics, and they are influential and decisive. The greens, the phlegmatics, are considerate and they're generous. The blues are often thoughtful, compassionate, and analytical. And then on the flip side, as we talked about strengths and weaknesses, we identified some of those weaknesses, and we said, for yellows, the sanguines, they can also oftentimes be interruptive, right? They can interrupt people, be dramatic. The reds, the cholerics, can be inflexible and even selfish or bossy at times. The greens, phlegmatics, are stubborn, or they can become sluggish and procrastinate. And the blues can become overly suspicious and oftentimes overly moody. But one more note about these temperaments before we take a look at the innate needs is that each color, again, needs a constant supply of their needs being met. The occasional kind word to somebody simply doesn't cut it. And again, it may not be our intention to offend or to let someone down or to allow their tank to become empty. And that's why it takes action. That's why it takes effort. And that's why we are talking about this topic at all, so that we can speak helpful words to people on a daily basis. Now, let's begin with the sanguines and the yellows. For them and their innate needs, each one of the colors has 4 innate needs. And for the sanguine, their innate needs are approval, acceptance, attention, and affection. Now, let me tease these out, just kind of explain what these are. For approval, it means that they are being liked without the need to change. Nobody's asking them to change. They're just liked for who they are. The acceptance portion or need is about being invited and being included. The attention is that they have your full focus, they have eye contact, they know that at that point in time with your conversation, they are what matter to you most. And then lastly, the affection component or need is that they're noticed and they are acknowledged. And this is very, very important for the yellow temperament. Again, I have a daughter who's a yellow, and I can see all of these needs in her life, and I can see how she needs these needs to be fulfilled or to be met throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, to continually to kind of build her up and make her feel confident. The cholerics, the reds, the innate needs that they have are loyalty and a sense of control, appreciation, and even credit for their work. And so to break those down, so when we're talking about loyalty, we're talking about the idea of being prioritized and knowing that somebody has your back, that you have support. The sense of control is that everybody's following the plan, their plan, and everybody's pulling their weight. Everybody's doing what needs to be done. The appreciation comes from the need to be valued for their strengths, for their delegation, for their decision-making, those types of things. And then also for their credit for work, for somebody to value their contribution to a project or to the family or whatever it may be. But that's essentially the innate needs of the choleric, the red. The phlegmatic or the green innate needs are harmony and a feeling of worth, the lack of stress, and also respect. And so when we're talking about harmony, it looks like, that people are getting along, that things are going smoothly. That's what a green is after. That's the needs that they need. Like, so within the family unit, there's a sense that everybody's getting along, nobody's upset with each other. The feeling of worth that they need is about being valued for their strengths, much like the red in their appreciation, who wants to be valued for their strengths. The phlegmatic needs that feeling of being worth something. And sometimes there's a confidence issue with phlegmatics. And so that's boosted by kind words and someone, appreciating them and valuing their strengths. The lack of stress is kind of self-explanatory. It's an absence of conflict. It's no combative words. You'll find with phlegmatics that they're very careful with what they say to people, and they expect others to be careful with what they say to them. It's kind of a reciprocity issue, and anything beyond that then begins to upset the harmony of everybody getting along and things going smoothly, and that can become an issue for a phlegmatic. The last need of the phlegmatic is respect. They want to know that their thoughts and opinions matter, that they're valued. And when someone asks them their thoughts and opinions on something, it makes them feel respected. And so a very important need for the phlegmatic. Now, on the blue side of things, on the melancholics, the 4 innate needs there are safety and sensitivity, support, and then also space and silence. Those two are kind of the same. When we're talking about safety, it means that they're able to trust their surroundings and trust the people that they're with. And this is very, very important for the phlegmatic or for the blue. The sensitivity is an idea of being understood, that somebody gets them. Somebody can understand how they feel, right? And that makes them feel acknowledged and valued and worthy. The support is about someone offering or providing help. Maybe the blue may not ask for it, but just knowing that there's someone there who says, hey, if I can lend a hand, let me know. And that just goes a long way for the blue to fill their needs. And the last one is space and silence, again, which is self-explanatory. Sometimes they just need time to process. They need time to decompress and think, to get away from people, to get away from stressors, whatever it may be. They just need some alone time. A lot of time that comes with silence. They don't need to, be by themselves in a loud room. They want to be somewhere where they can have their own space and they can have their silence. Now, you may have noticed, as I've talked about those, the innate needs complement the colors of the temperament. So when you're talking about the yellow, who's all about fun, right? Those needs complement that color. When you're talking about the red, who's about power, the green, harmony, and the blue, about order, these temperaments crave the words, and that's us. We crave the words that fill us up, the words that we need to hear. The problem that we experience is something that a lot of times we experience in culture, is that culture sends mixed messages to us oftentimes. Culture has established a set of norms that exist. And so, you're going to do it this way. Everybody has to act the same, those types of ideas. And I used to be an educator, and when I would think about the classroom setting, it drove me crazy when educators, when teachers, professionals required every kid to behave the same way, when we know and we're taught in education that they're not made the same way, but there's this type of uniform behavior that we almost have to have in order for the processes we use in education today to be effective. But the truth is, I don't think that it's as effective as it can be, because we're not teaching these children to lean into their strengths and away from their weaknesses. So, for example, when we're talking about the red, oftentimes in their power, right, which is what they're known for, they're seen as bossy. And so by making decisions or being assertive, culture can sometimes say, well, you're being too assertive, you're being bossy, when really maybe they're just taking charge. When you talk about a blue who is sympathetic and requires compassion and it's an understanding, we're taught in our society that sometimes, like, if a man behaves that way or that's their temperament, they're seen as weak or needy, and that's horrible, because there are such strengths in that blue temperament. When we're talking about a yellow who is exuberant, they're over the top, they're storytellers, they're the center of attention, oftentimes society will flip that on them and call them show-offs, and that they're just being self-centered. or with a green who needs a little more space, need a little more time to get things done, needs some peace and harmony, they're seen as lazy because they may not get it done in the same time frame as everybody else. And so the pursuit even of these innate needs, of the yellow to find affection and find appreciation, or for the red to be valued for their contribution, even the pursuit of these things at times is seen as sinful from some people in even the religious realms of things, that it seems self-centered to be a show-off or a big storyteller or the center of attention. But in reality, it's who God wired them to be. We just need to learn to navigate them and guide them to live in their strengths and the capacity, too, that they live in such a way that they build other people up. And so because of this mixed messages and cultural confusion, it can create a lot of tension. But fortunately for us and who God is, He brings clarity to these types of situations. He is not a God of confusion. And God tells us that it's okay to have these needs, and it's vital for us to have these needs met in the proper way so that we can leverage these needs and living in our strengths. And what that essentially does is empower us to be the person that God has created us to be, for you to be the person that God has created you to be, to fulfill the purpose that God Himself has created for your life. And you begin to live as your authentic self. You're not having to hide, feeling like, needing your needs met is some bad thing in your life, but that you have them met through the right channels in the right way when you begin to understand the innate needs of your temperament. For a yellow specifically, they're going to seek attention. Well, we want to make sure that they're seeking the right kind of attention, especially as they go through their teenage years and middle school and high school and into college. We want to make sure that they're seeking attention from the right people and the right things. And so the need itself is not a problem. It's how we guide them to have those needs met. And so now let's take a little more practical look at how Kathleen explains this about our strengths and about how these needs can be met. And so in talking about the sanguines, if you're a yellow, then in your strength, you are enthusiastically engaging with people and situations, conversations, storytelling. You're there to get that kind of attention. You want to tell the story and for people to laugh. That is not a bad thing. If you're a choleric, if you're a red, you are self-directed, you are self-motivated, you're adventurous, you have a plan, and things are under control. That's what it looks like for a red who has their needs met. For a green, a phlegmatic, the strength, when they're living in their strengths, they're easygoing, they're totally accommodating to people, sharing their thoughts and opinions, more openly than they would in their weakness, and they know how to bring harmony into a situation. They're great mediators, and when chaos is happening all around them, they are keeping their calm and helping people get through it. And so you can tell, that's a very strong attribute to have. A melancholic or a blue, they're cautious, they're observant, and they're aware of their surroundings and people, and they're sensitive, they're compassionate, and they're empathetic. And so they're always trying to solve the problem. They're observing the problem, noticing that there is a problem to begin with, and where the yellow may not notice it at all, and they're being naive, and then the blue is trying to do something about it. They're trying to be sensitive and empathetic to the people around them. So these strengths are incredible, and when these needs are met, we operate at such a capacity, again, that we're able to achieve the purpose that God has put into our lives. Now, the point of the innate needs, too, and I need to make this point, is to help us leverage that strength, but to also understand these needs are filled, not met, okay? And what that means is the innate needs never go away. You never fully and finally satisfy these needs. It's like your appetite. You always need to eat. You're not going to eat one meal and it totally, satisfies the urge to ever eat again. And so you have to think, again, of these needs as a gas tank. And eventually, as you go throughout your day, the gas in your car reduces, right? And so then there's this space and it needs to be filled back up. And it's the same way. We have these daily innate appetites for these needs that needs to be renewed constantly. And so we need to give careful consideration to this. We need to understand that this isn't something you get to change, okay? You may say, well, I don't like those weaknesses and I don't like the temperaments. Well, it's not something you can just shy away from or ignore. It's actually a principle really that exists in the background of life, and you can choose to leverage it for your benefit, or you can choose to ignore it to your detriment, and it'll cause harm. We are hardwired with these needs and with these temperaments. And again, you can't change them, right? This is what exists. If you cause people to change, or you try to force people to change, you will actually push people into their weaknesses, and they'll begin to live out all of that list. If you go back and look at the links and you see the weaknesses of their temperaments, they'll live out those weaknesses. And at times it will bring shame and confusion on the individual. And the way that they will respond is by acting out, which is something that we're going to talk about next time, in signaling, or how as adults we manipulate when we don't have our needs met. And so we need to give these careful consideration and understand how this happens. And if you begin to see the weaknesses, then you can kind of understand it and begin to be prepared that, hey, they need some type of need to be met. And let me give you some examples. For the sanguine and their weaknesses, they're going to become negative, not optimistic, not their optimistic selves. They're going to be impulsive. They're going to be loud attention seekers. They're going to be conforming to other people to get along and to seek approval, which can be dangerous. They're going to interrupt, and they're going to lack focus and follow through. And oftentimes what you'll find with a sanguine, they won't consider the consequences of their actions until later down the road when they're face to face with them. And a lot of times, this is the person who kind of looks up and says, how did I get here, right? I never intended to be here, but this is where they are. The choleric with the red, when they're living out in their weaknesses, this is a temperament that becomes demanding and inconsiderate. They're viewed, they really are, as bossy and blunt, or even prickly is a way that I've heard them described. They begin to exert their control and their influence. They refuse to ask for help. And let's face it, if you've ever met someone like this, you know that they always have to be right or get the last word in, right? And so this temperament can be very demanding, very strong and overpowering. The phlegmatic, which is the green, in their weaknesses, they become very stubborn and very stoic. And I can relate to this, and my family can relate to this. There's a refusal that takes place to share or to participate in conversations. It's like, if you can just ignore it, it'll go away, and we know better it doesn't. For the green, they'll oftentimes lack motivation in their weaknesses. Sometimes the green, the tendency is to not tell the truth in order to appease other people or to make other people happy so that there's not tension. They won't stand up for themselves, and then what you may see in them is this general disinterest in whatever is going on. And so it can become a very glum state of mind, if you will, as a green, living in that weakness. For the melancholics, if they don't get their innate needs met, this is the temperament who can become very critical and criticizing others. They can complain a lot, pointing out the negatives in situations and with people. They also will refuse to participate, and then what you may see in them is an extreme moodiness. And so when you see these factors, when you see these actions, you can kind of begin to know, oh, something's going on here. Maybe I should, be more intentional and responsive at trying to fill up their innate needs. That tank is getting empty. Now, again, like always, after talking about this, chances are you can identify yourself in one of these colors, and probably even have thought of someone else in one of the other colors. And it's always fun to try to identify what is your spouse, what color are they, what color are your children or your coworkers, your friends and family. But you can begin to see, I hope, the importance of understanding your color and your wiring, because it influences everything you do. Your color actually colors your conversation. Now, as we wrap up, I want to say this. We all have a community, right? We all have a community of people around us, whether in our workplace, our family, friends, whatever it may be. And this community can fill up your needs tank. They really can. They can become aware of who you are. You can share it with them, or they can then also kind of take a deep dive into the temperaments and learn about themselves and become aware. But unfortunately, here's the thing. While they can fill up your needs tank, they're often unreliable to do so, right? Oftentimes they can't. And if people are operating in their weaknesses, then they don't have anything to give to somebody else. And so what do you do when that happens? And I want to give you 2 things to take away, kind of homework again, something that you can utilize to better your own life. And the good news is you play a part, but also God can play a part in this as well. So for you specifically, each time that you respond, each time that you speak, you want to choose your strength. You want to choose your strength. You want to speak out in your strengths, because in doing so, you can help kind of in a self-fulfilling way fulfill the need that you have for yourself. And so for a green to speak harmony into chaos, into tension, into someone else's life, you're actually able to kind of process that through yourself, and you can speak that into your own life. And so for a yellow to be optimistic instead of negative, you begin to bring the optimism, seeing the best in people and circumstances, then that helps to build up your tank as well. So you do play a part in this. And another part in this, when other people can't fill up your tank, is that God can speak into this. And the way that God speaks into this is simply through Scripture. That through Scripture, that if we could structure our days, knowing even the times in our days when our needs begin to deplete and we need to be filled back up, that we can dive into Scripture and we can connect our relationship with God to the structure of our days to make sure that our needs are met. And so a couple of examples of that is like for a red, for a choleric, you can focus on God's promise of faithfulness and love. He's dependable, right? And that he loves you. For a yellow, for a sanguine, you can focus on God's promise of being a family, that you're included into something, that you are appreciated, and that God is a loving father and you have brothers and sisters. Like that's a big part of who a yellow is. For a green, they can focus on the promise of peace that surpasses understanding. In fact, some of my favorite verses in Scripture are Ephesians chapter 4, and it talks about that peace, that God gives us a peace that we can't explain. It doesn't come from our own doing, but something that God provides, and that can bring peace to our lives. For a blue, for a melancholic, in reading Scripture, you can focus on God's promise of justice through mercy and grace. So it's compassion and understanding and rule following, those types of things, but understanding the grace of God in the midst of all of that. And just so that it's helpful content for you, I'm going to provide in the links today scriptures that you can read that are based on your temperament. And so that hopefully that'll be a helpful resource for you. And so regardless of the words that other people speak, we just have to remember that we must choose to speak the words that build other people up according to their needs. It's so important. And in the same way, in doing so, it will begin to fill up our needs as well. Now, I do want to leave you with 2 activities that you can follow. And the first one, I think, is that as you've heard about these needs, and we've posted them also in the links for this podcast, what's very important for all of us is that we define our needs personally. And so the question I would have for you in this is, how do you define each one of those needs? And so if you're a sanguine, you're a yellow, how do you define affection? What does that look like for you specifically? And because 2 people could be the same color and they might define it differently than each other. And so it's really good to define it. And you may say, I need affection, and then you fill in the blank of whatever that strength is, affection or need, and then which I define as, and you can kind of give the spiel there, and you'll see it in the link that we provide. And then to say that it would be good if someone would say, or if someone said, and then you kind of tell what you could use to fill up that particular need. And then the second activity through the links that we provide is to dig into Scripture and consider maybe memorizing one or two and displaying them throughout your house. You can put them, print them off and put them on your walls. But those Scripture references will be provided, and you can use those to be a constant reminder for yourself of what God has to say, and that can help support your innate needs for your temperament. So anyway, that's it for today. I mean, that's all I've got. Just remember to check out those show notes today, and there's more resources there to determine your color and your wiring. And the hope is that you are continuing to grow and become more confident in choosing, being intentional about the words you use and how you're filling up the tanks of other people. And next week, we're going to talk about signals. We're going to talk about how we manipulate when our needs are not being fulfilled. And it's going to be a fun conversation. And then at the end of this podcast series, to kind of let the cat out of the bag, I'll have a guest on with me to talk through all of this in a real life scenario, to take a look at what these temperaments in this study really means when we begin to apply it to the different areas of our lives. Well, that's it for the breakdown today. We'll see you next time. Take care. God bless you.